Is it okay if I vent about my mental distress to you guys for just a moment? I mean, what am I talking about? I do that all the time in one way or another, you know, depending on the mental condition that's bothering me that day, because I have so many mental conditions that it's sort of like, what do you want to call it? Like a rigmarole or just like a random chance, sort of like spin in the mystery box. Like, okay, which mental disorder of mine's gonna bother me today? Some days it's my depression, some days it's my anxiety, some days it's my PTSD, some days it's my ADHD, and some days it's my OCD. Well, within the last few days, my OCD has been bothering me really bad, and this is gonna sound like such a stupid thing for me to say, but I'm not too big for my britches, or, you know, I'm not so beyond myself, or however you want to put that, to where, you know, like, I'm not ashamed to say, look, I have problems too, and I'm just gonna share them with you guys, since I already spent enough time talking about them on video as is, but, so, you know how a lot of video games nowadays, you turn them on, and they have a lot of settings, whether that be, you know, various controller settings, like sensitivities, or graphic settings, like motion blur, or depth of field, or, you know, subtitle settings, or one thing or another. Normally, for me, my OCD, it is kind of bad about that stuff. Like, I'll turn on a game like Call of Duty, for example, and I'll go into my settings, and I'll be like, okay, motion blur is off, but even though I can see that I turned off motion blur, and I know for a fact that I just turned off motion blur, and even if I go in game, like right now, like, as you can see, there's no blurring going on when I look around, my brain just won't accept that, and I'll need to sit there staring at it for a second, repeatedly looking at it to, like, verify in my brain that it's actually off. And this isn't just a thing with, like, graphic settings. This happens to me all the time with so many various things in my life, where it's like, okay, I know, like, for example, if I'm looking at my thermostat, I know I set it at 72 degrees, but that's not enough for me. I need to, like, really stare at it, stare at the numbers, break it down, and let my brain process, like, okay, that says 72. I can go on about my day now, and I'll need to, like, do a whole process, like, okay, it says 72. I wanted it at 72. It is literally perfect as it is. I do not need to touch it. Everything is okay. I can go on with my day. And again, sometimes that's enough, and other times it's not, and I'll still need to sit there staring, like, it's a what the huh? Y'all just saw that, right? Like, I already knew it was possible to get a ray gun from that vending machine, but, like, I mean, I wasn't expecting it. I'll take it. The game was probably listening to me talking about all my mental problems, and they were like, dog, we genuinely feel bad for this guy. Let's give him a hand. He's really going through it right now. But I have, like, this whole stupid, like, song and dance in my head where I need to, like, go through it almost in a rhythm of, like, okay, it says 72. That's perfect. And then I'll need to, like, say that in my head, like, 3 or 4 times, and then that'll be enough to, like, get me by for, like, 5 minutes until it's like, oh, wait, no, I need to check it one more time just to make sure it actually said 72. Like, I'm not kidding. My OCD is, like, genuinely that terrible. But it's not like that every day, and it's not like that about everything. It's just very selective. It depends on the day, and I noticed it really only happens when there's other things in my life that are already kind of bugging me or stressing me out. And, you know, with it being the holidays and with there being some things just happening in my family in general right now, I'm not going to go too much further in depth with that. You know, that's probably has something to do with it. Because, like, for example, I was playing, you know, Black Ops 6 over my PS5. And even though, obviously, you know, I already went through multiple times before to check just to make sure, like, all right, my sensitivities are set up perfectly, my crosshair settings are set up perfectly, my graphic settings are set up perfectly, my subtitle settings are set up perfectly, my texture streaming settings and eco mode presets, everything is absolutely perfect. And I already saw with my own 2 eyes that, yes, a world motion blur, weapon motion blur, depth of field, fidelity XCast, all of that stuff was turned off because I always turn that stuff off in Call of Duty. You know, again, my sensitivity things were perfect, my trigger effect settings for the haptics were perfect, which, you know, for me on PS5, I just turn off the trigger haptics just because, you know, when you're playing the game for a while and when you're trying to stay not necessarily competitive, but just not have anything hindering you, as much as I love haptic feedback in, like, single player games and stuff, when it comes to multiplayer games, I usually turn that stuff off just so I can be as quick as possible on the triggers. Well, yesterday, even though I was literally playing the game and I was sitting there, like, pulling the triggers, and I could feel there was no resistances, there was no dead zones, there was nothing like that, my brain was still saying, no, Nathan, that's not enough. You need to go into the settings and make sure that it's actually off. So I had to go into the settings and sit there and just, like, stare at it for a minute and just be like, okay, it literally says that it's off. That's perfect. That's the way it should be. I should be able to just go on with my day now, right? No, I had to go back in and check it multiple times, and then I just sit there staring at my sensitivity number settings for a while just to make sure, like, that they were okay. Like, it was a whole thing. But yeah, yesterday it was the controller sensitivity and the trigger effect thing bothering me to where I had to sit there staring at that, making sure it literally said off, and then checking the numbers to make sure it was exactly as it needed to be. And then now today, for some reason, it's like the motion blur. For some reason, my brain's going, but Nathan, it might still be on. point, even though I'm playing the game and I can see, like, there's no way that, you know, my PlayStation, that, like, world motion blur, it's definitely off. The weapon motion blur, it's definitely off. When I look around, it's crisp as can be. When I reload, like, I can see even when my weapon's moving, it's clear as day. It's clear that there's no motion blurring happening. And just to prove it to my own stupid OCD brain, I literally looked up videos on YouTube of, like, Black Ops 6, Modern Warfare 3, like other players playing the game with motion blur just to see what the blurring looks like, and I'm like, oh yeah, that looks terrible. Looks like there's Vaseline on the screen. Like, mine is clearly not on, because when I look around at my game, you know, over on PlayStation, like, you know, it's crisp, it's clear as day. There's no motion blurring, but that still isn't enough for my brain, even having that, you know, mental verification, even though I've also looked at the settings before when I first set them, and they were perfect the way I had them when I set them. But after yesterday, I told myself, I was like, no, you know what, on my PC, it doesn't affect me. Like, right now when I'm playing on PC, I don't feel the urge to go in my settings and check them. When I play on my Xbox, I don't feel the urge to go into the settings to check them, you know what I mean? So it's like, why is it only happening specifically on PlayStation? And I know for a fact, it's just because that's how my OCD works. It picks and chooses when it wants to bother me and how it wants to bother me. And furthermore, as I had mentioned, I know for a fact it's only because there's other, like, you know, really stressful things happening in my life right now. As always, video games are literally my only escape, but with the way that my brain works, even when I try to escape, it still finds ways to try to bring me down and try to ruin my day and just try to, like, ruin me. But that's the thing. I know that I'm more powerful than my mind, and I'm not going to let it ruin me. Even though, yes, it does bug me incredibly, I know that if I ignore it for long enough and I just have that acceptance within myself, like, hey, I know for a fact I already checked my settings. Everything was perfect the way that I had it set up. I checked it yesterday again. Everything was still perfect there, just as when I first set it up the first time that I played the game on PlayStation. So, like, if it was perfect the first time, it'll be perfect now. It's not just gonna change itself. If it was perfect then, it's perfect now. As I'm playing the game, I can see that everything's perfect. The screen isn't becoming a blurred mess. There's nothing to worry about. I just need to relax, play the game, and have fun. And eventually, once I ignore it for long enough, and once I have that, like, acceptance period in my mind, my brain will just simply forget it until my OCD bothers me again some random day. But at that point, it'll be about something else, because again, it just sort of like picks and chooses what it's going to bother me about each day. But you know, for now, this is just like the current hyperfixation of my weird OCD brain. But at this point, like I said, I just need to, like, not go in the settings anymore. And I did good today. I haven't gone in the settings even once to check it. Again, after yesterday, I told myself, I was like, no, everything's perfect. I'm not going into the settings anymore. So now I'm in this part of the whole, like, transitionary period for my OCD where I'm gonna have that, like, uncomfortability factor where I'm gonna be a little uncomfortable, because I'll be like, man, but the settings are right there. I just need to go check them just once. But if I just restrain myself and I just don't do it, it'll be very uncomfortable, and it'll make me feel really weird for, like, a good day or two, maybe even 3. But eventually my brain will just be like, hey, everything's good, dog. Like, I'm playing the game, everything's good, and that'll be that. Again, to the normal human being without all of these issues and conditions, this probably sounds like the most weird thing in the world, but if you actually, because there's people that are like, oh, I have OCD, I need my room to be clean, and while yes, to an extent, that is like well, no, that actually is, like, definitely an OCD thing, that isn't, like, just what it is. There's also, like, other elements to OCD where, like, yes, sometimes there's gonna be certain things where, like, oh, you know, you need a certain thing in your setup to be a certain way, whether that be making sure that everything is clean, or you need something to be facing a certain way, or you need something to just be exactly as you need it to be, or you need to do something a certain amount of times for it to feel right. Like, if you lock your, like, for example, this is one of my hugest things. If I lock my door, I need to sit there and turn it between 2 to 4 times, depending on how bad my OCD is that day, in order for my brain to say, okay, it's definitely locked, nobody can get in. And I'm not sure if there's, like, medications or one thing or another out there for it, but, you know, I'm not a medications type of guy, right? Like, back, oh gosh, how many years ago was it? It was, dude, it's been almost 10 years since that. That's crazy to even say out loud, but yeah, almost 10 years ago now, you know, I tried various medications for all of my mental disorders. And it's not that none of the medications necessarily worked, because some of them, like, technically achieved their goal, but the thing is, the way that I felt on them didn't feel like me. And that's one of the biggest things that I've realized with a lot of my mental disorders is, even though, yes, these disorders suck, and it sucks having to come up with so many weird and, like, somewhat creative ways just to be able to, like, even cope with them, and there's gonna be a lot of days where I'm just really uncomfortable as my brain tries to, like, you know, just deal with this chaos that is my mind. That's just a part of who I am as a person. I've been dealing with it for a year. I've been dealing with it for my entire life, and if I've dealt with it at this point for over 2 decades, then why can't I continue to just cope with it, right? Again, it's a part of who I am. I would rather still feel like me and still feel like a human being rather than feel like a zombie and know that a medication is altering my very way of thought and my thought processes and the way that I've come to know to not just cope with my disorders, but just think through things in general in life and just live as who I am. So I'd rather live with my defects and learn how to cope with them and overcome them rather than take the easy way out, per se, and just pop a pill that'll come with its own thing of side effects and just completely alter my mindset, because it makes me less happy living that way, if I'm gonna be honest. Anyways, I'm sorry for all the long-winded tangents, but that's just, you know, it's really helpful for me sometimes from time to time. So, you know, if it was really bothering anybody watching the video, I hope that they would have just clicked off by now and just went to watch something else, because I don't ever want somebody to watch a video or watch content that they don't enjoy. I mean, that's silly. If you don't enjoy my content, please don't watch it. I don't want you to waste your time or watch something that you don't enjoy. Please go watch something that you do enjoy. But that being said, you know, if you're still watching to this point, I'll assume that either A, you enjoy my content, or that B, maybe you could just relate in some way. So, yeah, you know, in the last couple, especially like the last couple months, you know, within the last year, I've been trying to make steps towards like completely just like beating my OCD, even though I know that's never realistically gonna happen. Like, you can't just completely beat that kind of condition, but you can find a lot of really helpful ways to cope with it and learn to have that willpower to just completely fight back against it. So I'm still in that process, especially within the last couple of months. I'm really trying. I really want to overcome it and find more strategies that work for me, because my main strategy up to this point has just been brute forcing it and just being like, hey, you know what? Something is what it is. It doesn't matter. I don't need to do the OCD routines for my brain to know that it's okay. So, you know, I just gotta like brute force it, go through an uncomfortability period for like a day or two, and then I end up being fine. I found that to be the fastest strategy for me, but I would also like to find out if there's maybe more efficient strategies out there to, I don't know, not necessarily help with the uncomfortability, because I know that's always just going to be a part of it, having this condition, but maybe more or less some more preventative measures, or just maybe some more efficient strategies. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into it.